We are live. Megan Griffiths, welcome to Utah Valley University. We
Hi.
just watched your movie. We've got about 30 people here. And what do you think, guys? Clap your hands. You can't see it. We're in just a big lecture hall here. Where are they? There they are. Wave your hands. They're all spread out. You can't see it. We're in just a big lecture. Okay, now it's doing that again.
Oh,
that's right. Oh, yeah, that's right. Never mind. Figured it out. It's because that's open on another window. Okay. Okay, now I don't want to see myself really big. Here, I want to see you. There you go. All right. So, Megan, thank you so much for being with us and coming. It's such a fun film. We really love it. I didn't tell anyone that Johnny Depp was in it, and there was this big, like, kind of roar of laughter when he shows up. And it's just such a fun film. Cast is so great, directing is so great, cinematography is great.
thank you.
So yeah, I really love it. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions, just like a regular Q&A, and then they've all been thinking really hard about questions that they want to ask you, and they'll just come down here and do it here, so it's like you're talking to them personally. And you guys will say your name and who you are, so she knows who she's talking to. All right, I'm Duane. So I'm going to ask a few questions. I know about the movie because I've done my research, but they don't know probably because they're just students and they don't do research. So can you tell us a little bit about where this all came from? It's interesting because most films that we show are independent films that are largely director-driven, right? A director kind of writes and directs a story and kind of is the what happens behind it. But you kind of came on later, hired as a director. So can you talk about that process? Because that's a little unique and will be like new to kind of them and how that works.
Yes, I'm getting it too, actually.
Oh, you're getting it now?
I am. Hang on, let me.
Make sure that you don't have it open in another screen. I don't know why you would, but I had that problem.
You guys are getting a closer look at the place I'm staying in Los Angeles right now.
We will not judge you.
Oh wait, I'm not echoing anymore. Maybe it's just like this.
Yeah, earlier when we were testing, it did the same thing. It did it for me really briefly and then stopped.
Okay, so what I was gonna say was that my film that I did that sort of that got me going into directing full time is a film called The Off Hours, and that was that experience where I built it from the ground up and it just took everything in me. And after that, I was offered first a film called Eden and then a film called Lucky Them, and both of which were mostly financed by the time they came to me, and they seemed ready to go, with the exception of a little bit of script work and casting and these sort of final pieces. And there was something really appealing to me about the idea of coming on to something that I didn't have to build from the ground up, but that I was still interested in and invested in, and there was characters that pulled me. So yeah, this one came to me via this director named Colin Trevorrow, he made an independent film called Safety Not Guaranteed, which was shot in Seattle. And then he went on to make Jurassic World and now is doing the third new Star Wars. So he's kind of had a meteoric rise in the film world. But he was at the film festival in Seattle and showing Safety Not Guaranteed. And he was telling me about this film, Lucky Them, that he had read and thought would be a good fit for me. And so he gave me the script and he connected me with the producer, and the producer's name is Emily Wachtel, and she'd been working on the film for 10 years at that point and was very, very, she was very close to it, and she really wanted to make sure it was in the right hands, and we just had a good connection about it, and she trusted me with it and sort of gave me the reins, which was a pretty bold move considering my last movie before Lucky Them was a thriller about human trafficking. So really different.
Right. Okay, so that's great. Yeah, I would appreciate that experience, the idea of not having to do everything yourself, which is often what us independent filmmakers have to do.
Yeah, it's nice not to have to do it all the way from the ground up.
Yeah. It's also nice to know that sometimes those projects that we work with for 10 years I have one of them, actually sometimes do get made. That's really hopeful.
I know. I was working on my stuff in the off hours. I was watching the Independent Spirit Awards, and so many people kept going up and thanking everybody for the award and saying, this project took 10 years to make. And I just, at that point, I think I was like 5 or 6 years in, thinking, oh God, I have 4 more years to go.
Great. So, okay, my next question has to do with, okay, so you're interesting because you're in Seattle. I don't know if that necessarily makes you interesting, but you're interesting because you're a filmmaker in Seattle. So, and all the films you've made have been Seattle-based. Mm-hmm. And you're in LA now, but you still live in Seattle, right? Am I right?
I do. I'm just visiting LA for a job right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So we have, we're in Utah, and Utah is a pretty nice little local film scene, and there's certainly a lot of our students who end up going to LA, but a lot of them stick around here. And so, can you talk about that idea of that sort of regional sort of film world and what that means to you, and how you've been able to make that work?
Yeah, for me, I love Seattle, and I moved there just to kind of see if I could make a career there, because there wasn't really an industry when I moved there in the year 2000. It's not huge now either, but it's definitely more established than it was when I got there. But I think what's nice about regional filmmaking and having these pockets around the country that aren't the sort of metropolises of New York and Los Angeles is that, for one thing, it shows people more of the world, and different people, different regions, sort of grow different people and different perspectives. And so I think it's important that all perspectives aren't LA and New York. So I think that's one. But two, it's just, I'm in LA right now, and I can tell you it's just like a different environment. And it's, I have like this whole theory around the transactional nature of every conversation you have in Los Angeles. Everyone's either looking for a job or trying to hire, and I feel like that sort of palpable, what can I get from you? What can you give to me? Kind of energy in a lot of conversations, and I don't think that's very healthy. Staying grounded and understanding people and wanting to be around people, which I think is something that's really healthy for a filmmaker to really have an understanding of humanity and want to be like sort of amongst other people. Where in LA, I feel like people just kind of want to draw away from that because it can be really exhausting.
And you find that you have that in Seattle?
I mean, I do personally feel like I have that in Seattle. And it's just like an environment that I love, and I like the weather. Not everybody does, but I like it. And the people are really just chill and good people.
Did you move up there from LA, or where did you move from?
I moved there from Ohio.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little personal now, but
that's okay.
biographical information. We want some backstory.
Yeah, no, I went to film school in Ohio and then decided to move to Seattle just kind of to see if I could make it work, because I knew I liked the city. And then I just ended up staying for 16 years so far.
Excellent. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about, these are all things more about you than the movie. And maybe everyone here will come up with real specific questions about the movie. I do have some, but maybe I'll just let them ask them. But I want to know, you worked for a long time as a first AD.
I did.
And can you tell me how the experience of working as a first AD assisted you as you transitioned to directing your own films?
It helps me like every moment of every day that I'm directing, because when you're an AD, you have to get a real clear sense of what everybody's jobs are on the set and how they can do those jobs efficiently. And so if you understand that when you're directing and people have questions for you, you're much more able to give them the answer, just the information that they need, quickly and efficiently. And any efficiency you can have, it helps you as a director, because it gives you more time to get performances that are good and get coverage and get more things that you can use in the editing room to make a good movie. So especially in the pre-production phase, I find it is invaluable, that experience. And it always makes my ADs happy that I used to be an AD, because I have a lot of respect for them. And there can be a little animosity between the director and the AD, because a lot of directors kind of assume that because the AD is trying to move them along and keep them on schedule, that they're sort of against the creative vision, which is just not the case. And I never think that, because that wasn't the way I was thinking of things when I was an AD. I have a lot more empathy for that role, I think, than a lot of directors.
Okay, excellent. Okay, we try to, one of our objectives in our school is to make people set ready and very, very ready to hit the ground when they get on sets, and we're very production savvy and G&E savvy and all that sort of thing. So they are all in that mode. Okay, guys, why don't you come on up? And this is when you come up. They're always really shy. Okay, here comes somebody great.
This one's always the hardest. Somebody has to break the seal.
Yeah, it's always like, oh. All right, and if you want to come, you can form a little line right here. That always gets us really excited. All right, Megan, thank you so much. And I may come back with another question if no one asks it. So
okay.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go for it. We need a grill up there.
Yeah, we do need a grill at some point. Hey, I'm Gil in Holyoke. How are you? My first question, I guess, is specific to this film, because as your role as director, especially with the unique nature of you coming onto the film, what was your biggest challenge?
In general, overall?
Yeah, just with the whole film, as soon as you were on board, I guess, from then till the end.
Yeah, I think in this particular case, it was the fact that I was coming on to something that had been in progress for so long and was so close to the heart of the writer. And Emily was the writer and the producer, and sort of had a lot of, she had put many years into it, and a lot of sort of blood, sweat, and tears and personal, equity. And she really just wanted to make sure at every stage that it was kind of keeping to the version that existed in her head all those years. And since I'm a different person with a different perspective, it wasn't going to be exactly that. So it was sort of the process of finding the version of it that was pleasing to both her and me, and that we both felt ownership over, and that we both we could watch on the big screen and feel like we could stand up and defend and be proud of. And it was a process, and it was every stage. It was the script, it was the prep, the casting, it was on set, and it was in post, and it was in music selection and all these kinds of things. But I felt like we got there, but it was for sure the hardest part of it. I'm sure she would say the same thing.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Uh-huh. I'm super tall. I don't know how to say that. Hi, my question is, so I know you didn't, my name's Luke Kalmar. My question is, so I know you didn't write the film, and so I was wondering if you felt like you drew on past experiences and used those in terms of your directing, like for shots. And I just learned that you're from Seattle, so maybe even locations. But did you feel like, even though you didn't write it, that you kind of drew on personal experiences or something?
Yeah, for sure. When I got the script, it was set in New York, and so we actually worked together to reset it in Seattle. And I had notes. I always have notes on every script, so we changed a lot of things as a team. Like once I came on as a director, and one of the big things was, probably the biggest thing was the Seattle switch. And I have shot a lot of movies in Seattle, but not a lot of movies that were actually set there. The movie I'd shot before this, I shot in Seattle, but it was set in the Southwest. And so I was really thrilled to just be able to go around and shoot all these places, because I'm a person who goes to music shows in Seattle, and I really felt like I knew that world, and was able to really depict it in a way that I thought was really beautiful and authentic. So yeah, I think that was a big contribution.
So did you kind of pick locations, since you said you've been to music, you kind of just remember?
Yeah, there was a few places that I knew that I wanted. As soon as I read the New York version, I was like, well, this is the only place we could do this. And like the opening credits walk along the road where she's listening to music, that was something that I knew exactly what street and what direction she'd watch and walk and all that. But there's a few iconic venues for Seattle that people outside of Seattle, aside from touring musicians, probably won't know. But that she goes and sees music at the Crocodile, which is a place that's been around since the grunge era and is like really iconic Seattle venue. And there's a few places like that I think if you were to track it, it's like all the musicians who are playing where they're playing, it is the place they would be performing at that stage in their career. So I think it tracks very well that way.
That's cool. And then my other question was, this was the first film I've seen that you directed. And so I was wondering if you feel like you have like a directing style and how you use that in your movies, or like, you know how, I don't know, it's just, you kind of shoot a movie, but everyone has their own style. Would you say you have kind of like your own thing that you always think of, or?
I mean, I think I have. I'm really particular about color in all movies. I always have color palettes that I kind of abide by and give to the departments who are, the costume department and art department. Yeah. And lucky them, it kind of translated into lighting as well, because we had a lot of venues with those colors. And but I think in general, I'm a pretty classical filmmaker. Like, I tend to approach things in a fairly traditional way, and then just let the substance of the movie sort of guide the style a little bit. Like, reading the script or developing whatever the project is, it feels like it calls out like, this is a movie that should be handheld, or this is a movie that should feel really like locked in and static, and any movement should be really smooth. And those kind of choices, I think, just kind of are, for me, dictated by what the story is and what the characters are going through. And I don't like to try to impose too much on it. It's just style. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks.
Huh?
That's all.
Hi, I'm Brad Johnson.
Hi, Brad.
So my question is actually really similar to the last one. So in my in some of the classes that I've taken, my Colin professor said that this director, they went off this movie because they loved it so much and how it was directed, or something like that. Like they go up that kind of style in a way. Are there any movies that you like that you kind of use that style in your movies?
I mean, it sort of depends. I'm a really big fan of finding references that we can, like the crew and I can look at and have something physical and tangible to point at. Because it's easy to get crossed wires when you're just kind of talking in theoretical terms about what you want something to look like, or what references are appropriate for production design and all those kind of things. And so I tend to go out and get, a big stack of DVDs and find good reference frames for people to sort of use as guides. So I'm a
They took from one movie for this, they took from another movie for that.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, I think we looked at sort of tonally, we looked at like Laurel Canyon and Sideways, because even though Sideways doesn't look like this movie very much, it had that same sort of comedy drama combination.
Okay.
It shared an actor, Thomas Hayden Church, but yeah, it's like sort of different per the conversation that I'm having. It's like, is it a conversation about the tone that we're trying to achieve? Then it's this movie. If it's a conversation about what I want the production design to feel like, it's this movie. If it's a conversation about the look, it's this movie. So there's a lot to draw from.
Cool. Thank you. That's it.
Hi, Megan. I'm Kyle.
Hi.
So I wanted to ask about the Paul Newman quote at the end there. Was that from you? And if so, was he your mentor, or?
No, he was Emily's mentor. Emily went to, she grew up with Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward's daughter, Clea. They were really good friends for her whole life. And so Paul was actually, I never met him. Unfortunately, he passed away well before the movie was actually made, but he read early drafts of the script, and he was actually the person who got the script to Thomas Hayden Church, who was attached for 6 years before the movie got made. And he just was sort of an early supporter and cheerleader for it. And Emily really just adored him. His wife and widow, Joanne Woodward, Oscar winner herself, stayed on and was an executive producer for the movie. And I did get to meet her, and she has a small cameo in the movie as the landlady on the voicemail. But but the connection with Paul was all Emily. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, I'm Nathan Egley.
Hi, Nathan.
So I had a couple questions. First one being, At what point in your life did you realize that you wanted to go into movie productions?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like I don't know the answer to that question, but I can sort of trace it back. When I was in high school, I was a big movie fan, but I never made anything. I didn't have access to any kind of camera or editing facility. You know, it's like it was the 90s. This stuff wasn't as easily accessible as it is now. So I just kind of felt like I went to college and kind of found myself gravitating that direction. And because there wasn't any film production at my undergraduate institution, I started applying to film schools, and then I just kind of kept going that. So it felt like sort of a slow slide to me. But later in life, I found this journal entry from 1994 where I said that I was going to make movies. And I didn't remember having ever had that like firm of a notion about the fact that it was going to happen, but apparently I did. So I guess I just forgot, but it worked out.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I guess in that process, what would you say is the hardest part?
I think the hardest part is being persistent with it and not giving up on it if you feel like you have something to add to the conversation. I think, you know, anyone who's getting into making movies has a pretty tough road ahead of them. There's not a lot of people who have an easy path in, you know, becoming a sort of a working director. And there's even fewer people who have the kind of like overnight success that you read about sometimes. So you really have to have a lot of confidence in the fact that you have something to say that's worthwhile and interesting to others. And then you really have to just kind of be ready to make a lot of sacrifices and dedicate yourself to it in a major way, which is, it's tough because it's, you know, there's not a lot of money in it for the first, from my experience, for the first about 15 years. So it's tough.
What would you say was the toughest film you've had to make?
Probably Eden, which was the one I made right before Lucky Them. It was about domestic human sex trafficking, which is a really hard subject to live in for a couple years. Whenever I make something, I get really obsessive about researching and making sure I'm getting it right and it's authentic. And when that subject was sex trafficking, it was really dark and it was hard to just immerse and live in that.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, you're all guys.
I know. Listen, I've been working on it, but no, sorry, I can't do anything for you.
That's all right. It's okay that you're a guy.
I have 2 questions for you. Oh, by the way, my name's Austin. And so my first question is, if you had to pick a genre of film that was your favorite to make, what would you say it would be?
You know, I don't know if I have a favorite genre. I've always been, I've had conversations with people where they, sorry, I'm getting distracting me. But I've had conversations with people where they ask me what my favorite genre is, and I always say, you know, it's a bit, I'm much more attracted to character and story than I am to any specific genre, and I kind of like hopping around to various genres. One person I said that to told me after watching all of my stuff, and he said, "Oh, you have a genre. It's damaged women movies." And so that, you know, that I can't say that it's way off base, but I like movies about complicated people that you have to kind of dig a little deeper to understand what their motivations are and try to understand where they're coming from. That may not be on the surface likable and like sort of bubbly human beings. So that sort of draws me in. I like it when I have to sort of work a little harder to figure someone out.
All right. Damaged women is your genre.
Yeah. What can I say?
So my second question is about scoring this film. There seems to be a lot of original music for it and maybe some licensed and, of course, a score. But my question is actually about temp music. How do you feel about temp music when scoring a film?
I actually hate it. This is the only movie I've ever used it. Because I've worked on all of my other films, I've worked with the same composers, and this one was different. I work with different people, and in my other experiences outside of Lucky Them, I've had the enjoyable experience of having these composers who will create a lot of music sort of right off the bat. Like we kind of have these common reference points, and I give them a script that says, this is where I think I'm going to use music. This is the emotions I want it to evoke in these moments. And they'll just create a lot of stuff for me, and I use it throughout the edit, and then we sort of hone in on what it is, and they need to re-record something, they do. That process has been really great for me. It's really unusual and sort of not the norm, but I really love it. And when I went on this one, we actually were two different composers, and the initial composer wasn't really excited about that approach. So he suggested using temp music. But for me, it's tough because it's either I can't find what's right, so it's just never, I have a lot of feedback screens, and showing a movie that has the wrong music in it just feels like it's not doing, it's just not right. And so it's either I can't find the right thing, or I find the perfect thing, and then I'm asking the composer to just recreate something, which is not exciting for them. So I much prefer to use original music from the get-go if that's an option. That's just my own personal preference. But yeah, there was a ton of cues in this movie. We had something like 25 original song or 25 score cues, and then we had 25 or 30 music pre-existing songs that were in the film. So kind of an intense music film.
All right, thank you. We'll see.
Hi, my name is Matthias Garrett, and I'm actually not a film major. I watch a lot of movies, and I had a very specific question about the film.
Okay.
So at the end of Lucky Them, in the car, Ella was talking to Charlie about like what was our sentence, and I was wondering if it was left up to interpretation, whether they end up together in the end, or if it was actually kind of specifically they are ending up together.
I personally feel like it's a little bit vague, and I like it that way. I like to think about them as two people who informed each other's journey, but who aren't necessarily going to stay together for the rest of their lives. I think that you can kind of come into somebody's life and impact it without being sort of the love of their life. So for me, that's the version of the ending that makes sense. But I know the writer has a different version in her head. So it's just, even amongst the people who made the movie, we all have different ideas.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, see, I'm way too short. There we go. Nope, I'm still way too short. Oh, there we go. Hi, I'm Emma Dawson.
Hi.
Earlier you said that you have to work towards what you want, and that if you have something special to add, you should go for it. So what do you feel like you add to the film industry?
For me, what I kind of came to in the course of, driving towards this career was I come from a family that my mom was a social worker, and she instilled a sort of a deep sense of empathy in me. And I tend to, that tends to come out when I'm dealing with characters, especially characters that are complicated and who aren't like your sort of average likable leading ladies. And I think that sort of guides my entire approach to filmmaking, is looking at every character, not just the leading characters, but like all the way down the line, and trying to understand what brought those people to where they are. If they're making decisions that I don't understand, trying to understand where those came from. And so for me, I think that's my approach to filmmaking, and what sort of makes me a little more unique than to the average filmmaker is that sort of application of empathy to every character and to the people who were around me on set when I'm making the film.
Awesome. And what do you think being female in this industry, what has it been like for you?
It's interesting because in Seattle, the majority of the filmmakers who sort of have broken out or had some success are female. So I'm in a pretty weird pocket of the country where it's
Oh dear.
Oh my goodness.
Did I go away?
What have I done? Hold on. No. It's still there. She's still there.
It's okay.
Sorry. I just kind of.
You disappeared.
Yeah. I'm trying to raise the volume a bit, and I pressed the wrong button.
Okay. But yeah, no, so I'm kind of lucky that way where I'm in a really enlightened part of the world. There's a lot of, sort of women in leadership in Seattle, but I think the statistics don't lie. There's definitely a problem with diversity in gender and in, ethnicities in major Hollywood productions. And so, I can't point to an experience I've had and say like that's sexism, but I also can't deny that just because I haven't had that experience that it doesn't exist. So for me, it's just a matter of like, I just want to sort of keep my head down and make a movie and prove my worth. And I feel like you're constantly having to do that no matter who you are in this industry. You just have to show that you know what you're doing. And so I just try to focus on that and do good stuff.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think this might be our last one.
Okay. I had two questions.
Oh, cool. No, you can ask more than one question.
Cool.
Hey there.
Hi, my name is Taylor.
Hi,
And
Taylor.
so my question is, it's been a few years since you directed Lucky Them. And you've gone on to produce a couple more things. I noticed from your IMDb page. And so I was wondering, knowing with the experience you've gained over the past couple years and looking back on this project, is there anything that you think you may have done differently, or something that you wish you, like knowing what you do now, like might have made working on it easier, or just something you learned from it?
It's interesting. I've made a film since this one too. I made a film last summer called Night Stalker. But I think that, every project that you take from beginning to end, you get a huge education on. And with Lucky Them, I think the number one thing that I learned was just collaboration, because I've had my experiences before that were I definitely, film is always a collaboration, but in terms of like sort of the final creative word as a director on really small films, you get a lot of freedom. That's sort of the trade-off, is like not a lot of money, but a lot more creative freedom. And so with Lucky Them, it was sort of the first time I had to sort of get used to the idea of having to share that final say. Because I didn't have Final Cut on my own. I had mutual Final Cut with somebody else, and that was like a whole different world. And we had to just come to a place where we both were happy. And so it was interesting to go through that. It made me feel more prepared to do something larger, because I know that if I were ever to get into studio filmmaking, and I'm in LA right now to do a television show, and so to do any kind of filmmaking that has sort of a bigger budget and more people who have stake in it, you have to be ready to get a lot more opinions and sort of absorb them and use them in the way that you can still feel confident and stand behind as a filmmaker, who's the person whose name is in the director, lights at the end of the movie.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
And my second question is, so I'm a big fan of those really weird shorts that Adult Swim airs, and I couldn't help but notice on your IMDb page that you were listed as a co-producer for the Mops short. And I was wondering, how did you end up getting to do that, to work with that?
That's so funny. I did not expect a Mops question. I went to film school with the director of that project, Mops. His name is Todd Rohal, and I've actually worked as a producer on many of his movies, which if you like that kind of style, you should seek out his stuff, because he's got a really, really unique sensibility, and it's the kind of thing that he makes very different movies than I do. We are very different stylistically, but I have so much respect for what he does, and I like that it exists, and I want him to keep making movies. So I don't really consider myself a producer, but whenever I can help make his vision come to life, I do, because I just think the world needs Todd Rohal movies.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all I got.
All right. Anyone else? Okay, I have one more, because I can't believe no one asked you about your cast. And
I know.
casting you're probably getting. Now, you mentioned that Tom's Hidden Church was there from the beginning, like from forever. And what about Tony? And obviously, I want to know how you were able to score Johnny Depp. So.
Yeah, you guys are definitely the deepest into the questions before Johnny Depp's names came up. When I was doing Q&As for this movie, it was almost always the first question.
Well, that's a nice thing about doing Q&A for film students.
No, it's awesome.
They want to know a very different sort of set of things. So.
It's great. Yeah, Tony, we just sent it to. She was somebody who I've been a huge fan of her since Muriel's Wedding. I saw it in the theater in 1993, I think, when it came out, and just.
Let's just pause a moment. How many of you have seen Muriel's Wedding?
If there's 2 hands up, I'll be amazed.
Not a hand. Not a hand. It's so good.
So good. It's such a bizarre Australian film, but like it broke her out in a big way in the U.S. and she's been making amazing things ever since. And she's just like a brilliant actress. And so we just kind of gave it to her agent, and it turned out that she has been wanting to do something like this. And she's a huge music fan. She's married to a younger musician herself. She often gets cast in sort of this, a frumpier role, but she herself is this very vivacious, sort of sexy lady. So I think it was really appealing to her to play this part. It just felt more sort of pretty close to her own personality, and I think she just was stoked to do something about music. So that was that, and then Johnny Depp was somebody who Emily. In our very first conversation about the movie, she said, "Don't you think that Johnny Depp would be the perfect Matthew?" And I was like, "Sure." It didn't occur to me that was something that would ever happen. And even throughout the prep process, when she was sort of pushing harder on it, and as we started going into shooting, but the producer, all the rest of the producers and I were just like, there's no way, nobody believed it would happen more than Emily. But she had been working on it for years and sort of building a relationship with his production company in LA. And every time she'd be in LA, she'd go visit and talk about him doing this movie. So ultimately we were halfway through the shoot before we were trying to get that role cast, and he was #1 choice. And she had been calling every day, very persistently, and ultimately she got an email from his sister, who's his manager, saying, "My brother's really excited to do your film," which is just like a crazy. None of us could quite believe it. Even on the way to set that day, I was driving with my friend and Lacey, the co-producer of the film, and she said, "Are you nervous?" And I said, "No, I don't think he's going to come." So it was just like kind of a bizarre thing. A private plane flew up to Seattle from LA the morning of. He got to set around 11. We shot with him until about 3:30, and then he left, and I probably will never see him again. But he was great. He was really and awesome in the role, so I was thrilled that he did it. It's such an important thing to have. We all need to sort of feel like we know Matthew Smith, and so to have him turn around and suddenly go, of course, Yeah, it has that level of, we all have a history with this person, right? And it gives her reaction a lot more credibility because we understand where it's coming from. I think a little bit better. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, it's a great film. I'm excited for Night Stalker. We're friends on Facebook, and I've seen all your reviews about it and posts and things that you post, and it looks great. It looks like lots of fun. So yeah, it's very different from this. It's the thriller, dark, dramatic, but it's a good one too. Yeah, there's all sorts of. You can go a lot of different ways in the genre spectrum just in the last 4 movies. Well, let me ask you that real quick then, because we had Barry Sonnenfeld on here a couple years ago, and I said, hey, you shot for the Coen Brothers, you shot Miller's Crossing, and you shot Raising Arizona, and then for Rob Reiner, you shot Misery, and you shot When Harry Met Sally. These very different, tonally different films. So I asked him, what is tone? And he said, tone is everything. Can you kind of follow up on that and tell me what you think when you're doing these very different films, how you handle tone? For me, mentioned it a bit. You mentioned it a bit earlier. You said you mentioned it in an earlier question a little bit about tone. But it's such a tricky thing, tone. You have to really understand it pretty within your bones, because every choice lends itself to establishing that. And ultimately, it's like right now I'm casting. I'm shooting tomorrow on this TV episode, and the it's got a really tricky comedic / dramatic tone that runs through it. But I really wanted to make sure that the comedic stuff came through. So that was when I was, auditioning people, if they didn't have sort of a natural ability towards comedy, I felt like they would drag the tone that direction. And, when we're talking about how we're shooting it, it comes into those conversations too. Like, does that feel like, is there a funnier shot we could get in that moment? So, and Lucky Them was a huge, I think everybody was sort of on alert for me because I was coming out of doing a pretty heavy drama. But we chose the cinematographer based on comedic resume. We chose the composer based on a comedic resume. It was a lot of things that are going into creating the tone of the movie. And it's like every choice you make. So you have to be thinking about it all the way through.
Awesome. Thank you for that great answer. Thank you for this. This was really wonderful of you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. A busy schedule. Shooting his TV show tomorrow. So, my gosh, thank you so much for staying out.
No problem. It's only 8:37 where I am, so it's no big
Well, sometimes we talk to people in the East, and they're like this. They're like, yeah, no problem. I swear one person almost fell asleep in the middle of our conversation. So, thank you so much, and this has been great. So let's give her a big hand.
Thanks for watching the movie.
And good luck on the shoot tomorrow.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye, everybody.